The Shattered Vow. I've been married to Kate for 4 years, and we've been together for 9. From the outside, our relationship seemed like a fairy tale brimming with love, support, and understanding. We communicated well, rarely argued, and if anything, our physical intimacy grew stronger with each passing year. But there was one thing I'd always held firm on: infidelity. It was a line I could never forgive. We'd discussed it, even in hypothetical situations, and I'd always made it clear that if either of us crossed that line, it would be over. No second chances. No turning back. At least, that's what I used to think. Last weekend, Kate went home to visit her family, which wasn't unusual. Before she left on Friday evening, we had a minor argument about keeping the house tidy. It wasn't a big deal, but it left us barely speaking for the entire Saturday. I knew she'd be going out with some friends to a bar that night, and even though things were still a bit tense between us, I didn't think much of it. I trusted Kate completely, 100%, so I didn't feel the need to worry or suspect anything. Before going to bed, I texted Kate, "Hope you have a fun night out. Be back safe and drive carefully. Love you." She didn't respond right away, but I didn't think much of it. We hadn't spoken much all day due to the fight, so I just assumed she needed some space. Sunday morning, I woke up to a missed call from Kate at 4 a.m. An uneasy feeling crept into my stomach. Why was she calling at that hour? I immediately called back to check on her, but there was no answer. The automated voice on the other end only made me feel more anxious. I tried to calm myself, telling myself she probably just left her phone somewhere. But as the hours passed and I tried calling again and again with no response, I began to feel genuine concern. Every worst-case scenario raced through my head. Finally, about an hour later, I received a text, "I'm okay, don't worry, driving back soon." The uneasy feeling wouldn't leave me, though. The response was too short and didn't explain where she'd been or why she'd called me at 4 a.m. I put my phone down, a heavy feeling settling in my chest, and started to wonder, was everything really okay, as she said? Kate came home late that afternoon, but the moment she stepped through the door, I knew something was terribly wrong. She looked exhausted, unmade up, something that rarely happened. Her face was pale, her eyes were red and puffy, clearly from crying. Her whole demeanor was off, completely unlike the wife I knew. I went to hug her, but Kate recoiled, pulling away from my embrace. She didn't say anything, just looked down at the floor. My heart sank. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't expect it to be this serious. "Kate, what happened?" I asked softly, trying to keep my voice calm, but she didn't answer, just stood there like a ghost. "Come sit down, I'll make us some tea," I said gently, leading her to the sofa. With a knot tightening in my gut, I went to the kitchen, needing to do something to keep myself grounded. When I returned with 2 cups of tea, I sat next to her, took her hand, and whispered, "Can you tell me what's wrong? I'm here, everything will be all right." The moment the words left my lips, Kate broke down. Not a gentle sob, but a raw, guttural cry. A series of broken gasps she couldn't control. Her whole body shook, tears streaming down her face, and all I could do was sit there, desperately trying to comfort her. Those sobs lasted for 10 minutes, but to me they felt like a lifetime. With every passing second, I felt myself being pulled into the darkness, unsure what terrible truth awaited me. When her sobs subsided, she took a deep breath and said, her voice cracking, I slept with someone last night, after the party." In that moment, I felt something inside me shatter, like a thin thread snapping, pulling all my emotions with it. I couldn't put it into words. I only knew that my entire world had just crumbled before my eyes. I couldn't stay another second. I jumped up, said nothing, grabbed my keys, and ran to the car. Kate called after me, her voice panicked, "Please, don't go," but I couldn't listen to another word from her. The sound of the car door slamming shut felt like the collapse of our marriage. I drove away, my mind racing, with no destination in sight. I ended up at a park near our home, pulled over, and started walking aimlessly. For what felt like an eternity, I couldn't think clearly, only feeling an emptiness and pain spreading through my body. My phone buzzed incessantly, call after call from Kate, text after text pleading for me to come back, but I couldn't face it. I turned off my phone and just kept walking, as if by going far enough, I could escape everything that had just happened. After wandering around the park for a long time, I decided it was time to go back. I knew I couldn't avoid this forever, but I had no idea what awaited me when I returned to confront Kate. When I got home, I went to the garage, pulled out 2 suitcases, and walked straight to the bedroom. My heart ached, but there was no room for hesitation. I opened the closet, grabbed some clothes, Kate's shoes, and threw them into the suitcases, each item adding more weight to my shoulders. Her things were no longer a part of this house. I dragged the suitcases to the front door, stood there for a moment to regain my composure, then turned back to face Kate. She was sprawled on the floor of the living room, curled up in a ball, her shoulders shaking with sobs. The sound of her crying echoed through the room, a symphony of despair and pain, but I couldn't soften anymore, not after what had happened. I called Sarah, Kate's closest friend who lived nearby. My voice was dry as I told her, "Sarah, Kate needs a place to stay right now. She's at home and needs a ride to your place. She'll explain everything to you later." Sarah was silent for a moment, then agreed. I didn't say anything more, just hung up and turned back to Kate. "I'm leaving in an hour," I said, my voice harder than my true feelings. "Sarah will be here to pick you up. She'll take care of you, and you can tell her whatever you want." At that, Kate looked up, her eyes filled with tears, bloodshot. Don't leave me," she choked out, her voice catching. Then she crawled over, grabbing onto my leg, her tears soaking my pants. "Please, don't go. I messed up. I know I did, but don't leave me. Please." I stood still, feeling my heart tear into a million pieces. Her fingers clutched my leg, as if trying to hold on to me, keep us from shattering completely. But something inside me had died the moment she admitted the truth, and I couldn't go back. I looked down, my voice deep and heavy. "Kate, I can't. Don't do this. You know I can't stay." She cried harder, her hands refusing to let go, clinging to the last shred of hope, but I had made my decision. I bent down, gently pried her fingers off my leg, one by one, and walked away, leaving the sound of her sobs echoing through the house that once brimmed with love. After leaving the house, I drove aimlessly, my mind a whirlwind of emotions, everything blurring under the fog of my feelings. I didn't know where I needed to go, only that I couldn't bear to hear Kate's cries anymore, couldn't face the betrayal weighing heavily on my heart. Eventually, I stopped at a lakeside road I often visited when I needed to think. The water was still, reflecting the fading light of the day, offering a rare sense of peace amidst the storm of emotions. I stepped out of the car, letting the gentle breeze from the lake wash over me, carrying the crispness of the late afternoon. The scent of earth, damp grass, and the rustling of wind through the trees offered a temporary respite from the heavy weight in my chest. I sat down on a wooden bench near the water's edge, gazing at the rippling surface of the lake. Here, in this moment, there were no cries, no desperate pleas from Kate ringing in my ears. There was only silence, and I needed that. The scenery around me seemed to remind me that, no matter what happened, life continued, time kept moving. And even if my heart ached, things would eventually heal. I sat there for hours, just staring at the lake, letting my thoughts drift with the gentle waves. Gradually, a sense of calm returned, as if the scenery was mending the wounds within me, bit by bit. I knew I wasn't ready to forgive, not ready to face the future, but at least this moment offered the serenity I desperately needed. As darkness descended, the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon. I stood up, feeling a little lighter, and walked back to the car. Driving home, I didn't know how I would face Kate, but I knew a chapter of my life had closed. When I got back to the house, the lights were still on in the living room, but when I stepped inside, there was no sound. The house was completely silent, cold. I called out Kate's name, but there was no response. Looking down at the floor of the living room, where she had been curled up crying, there was nothing but emptiness. The suitcases by the front door were also gone. Kate was gone. I stood in the empty space, the feeling of emptiness consuming me. She was gone, just as I had wanted, but now, with the house empty, the silence didn't bring the release I'd imagined. It was just loneliness, deep and chilling. I sat down on the couch, my mind blank. The wind outside continued to whisper through the open window, but this time, it couldn't soothe the pain that had taken root in my heart. Monday morning, my mind clearer after a night of turbulent emotions, I decided to answer one of the many calls I'd been receiving from Kate. Her voice sounded hoarse and weak over the phone, as if she had been crying for days and nights. "Please, we need to talk. You can't ignore me like this. I need you. I need to explain." I cut her off, my voice calm but cold. "If you truly want a chance, send me an email. I want every detail, as clear as you can be, about what happened that night. And I'm being upfront, Kate. If you leave anything out, if there's even a small lie, don't expect any chance of reconciliation. Understand?" Kate choked out. "Are you sure?" "I can." "Email. Kate, that's all I want from you right now," I interrupted, then hung up before she could say anything else. Monday dragged on, shrouded in a fog of my own making. I tried to focus all my energy on work, but my thoughts kept drifting back to the email I was waiting for. That night, when I returned home, I saw that Kate's email was in my inbox. One click, and it would open. But I couldn't. I wasn't ready to face what she had written. Reading it meant facing the truth, the pain again, and I wasn't sure I had the strength. So I left it, still unopened. Since then, everyone around me, both my friends and Kate's, have tried to reach out, messages, calls all pouring in, but I haven't responded. I just focused on work, pushed myself to exhaustion at the gym, then fell into a deep sleep. It was the only way I could temporarily forget the turmoil in my heart. Tuesday afternoon, while I was at home, I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find Sarah, Kate's best friend, standing on my porch. Her face was determined, as if ready to walk in and demand answers to everything. Before I could say a word, she spoke. "You can't just cut Kate off like this. She told me everything, and you have to listen." I don't have to listen to anything from you, Sarah, I replied, keeping my voice calm, but my eyes couldn't hide the exhaustion and annoyance. If you want to know anything, talk to Kate, don't come here. But I didn't wait for her to say more. The door slammed shut in Sarah's face, the sound resounding with finality. I leaned back against the door, closing my eyes. All the words, the justifications, the pleas. Nothing but Kate herself could make me understand the truth. And while I knew I would have to open that email sooner or later, right now, I just felt empty and exhausted. I needed more time. Time to decide if I could face what truly happened. Since discovering the truth, I had also contacted a lawyer to discuss divorce proceedings. I didn't think I could wait too long before things became messy. I had moved money into separate accounts, keeping only what I needed. I blocked all contact with Kate and her friends, from social media to phone numbers. I didn't need any more justifications or apologies. Everything was cut off, as if I was untangling myself from a previous life. Strangely, though, I didn't feel the overwhelming anger or grief I felt at first. Everything I was doing, from contacting a lawyer to cutting off communication, felt automatic. There was no sense of outrage, no resentment, just numbness. An emptiness clung to me. Every decision I made, from contacting a lawyer to cutting off communication, happened mechanically, as if my body was on autopilot while my mind was lost somewhere far away, uninvolved. Yesterday, when I came home, I saw that Kate had left a note on the door. In it, she requested that I meet her tomorrow, just a few lines, but heavy with weight. And now I'm still debating. What does she want from me? A conversation to explain? To plead? Or a final goodbye? I asked myself, should I meet her? Would it change anything? What good would it do to try to reconcile after all this? Just thinking about it exhausts me. Part of me still remembers the good times we had, but another part can't forget the feeling of shattering when she admitted her betrayal. Maybe it's too late to go back. Is it normal to feel like a robot? I've read through emails from my lawyer with no real emotional response. Everything happening around me feels like a dream, and I don't know how to wake up. I don't feel angry, just a vast emptiness inside. But I also know I can't keep living like this, in numbness and apathy. How do I break free from this state? How do I face it all without feeling like a hollow shell? After days of contemplation and turmoil, I decided to meet Kate. However, I still couldn't bring myself to open her email. I needed to hear it directly from her, no matter how difficult it would be. When Kate arrived at my house yesterday, she looked awful, red, puffy eyes, a pale face, and an exhausted demeanor, as if she had lost all her vitality. As soon as I opened the door, Kate lunged at me, trying to hug me tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," she mumbled, her voice breaking between sobs. I gently but firmly pushed her away, refusing to let my emotions override my reason. "No, Kate, don't do that. We need to talk." We sat down on the sofa, the air between us heavy like an invisible wall. I started the conversation by making it clear, "I'm going to record this conversation. Do you agree?" Kate nodded, her eyes still brimming with tears. I hit the record button and continued, "Now I want you to explain everything. And for your information, I haven't read the email you sent." Kate took a deep breath, then began to speak. She said that she went to a bar that night with two friends I knew and liked, Sarah and another friend. She detailed what they drank, and I was surprised to learn that the amount of alcohol she consumed wasn't as much as I'd imagined. She said she only had a few glasses of wine and a cocktail, the amount we usually had when we went out for dinner. I wasn't completely drunk, just a little tipsy, she admitted, which only confused me further. She knew exactly what she was doing. Around midnight, Max, Sarah's younger brother, came to pick them up. I knew Max. He was 27 years old, and there was an inside joke in our group that Max had had a crush on Kate since high school. I'd heard them joke about it, but I never thought it was a real issue. Kate said that after they got food, Max started dropping everyone off until it was just her and him in the car. She told me she didn't want Max to drive another 20 minutes to her parents' house after a long day of work, so she decided to just call an Uber from Max's apartment. She went inside Max's apartment to order an Uber, but she couldn't get a ride. Max suggested that she sleep in his bed and he'd sleep on the couch, then take her home in the morning. Kate said she refused, but she kept trying to order an Uber with no luck. Then she sighed and continued, "We sat on his bed, and he kissed me. I kissed him back, and then, it happened. We had sex." The story felt like a knife twisting in my heart. I kept silent, not wanting to show the pain that was clenching my chest. Kate continued, her voice breaking even more. "Afterwards, I felt terrible. I started crying right away. Max drove me home, and I sat in the car, crying for another hour before trying to call you and tell you everything." We had to pause the conversation several times, as Kate kept collapsing and crying uncontrollably. She bowed her head, covering her face, tears cascading down her cheeks. Every time she paused, I just sat there, silently looking down at my hands. I didn't know what to feel anymore. I know it was a big mistake. I don't know why I let myself be swept up in the moment. Maxie doesn't mean anything to me. I only love you, only you. Please, she choked out, her voice desperate. It was horrible. I ruined everything. I heard those words, but they just sounded like empty noises. Blah, blah, blah. Everything she said was just the usual justification swept up in the moment. A horrible mistake. Loved me more than anyone. But did it really change anything? She had done the unforgivable. All the reasons, all the apologies meant nothing when the reality was that she had betrayed me. After Kate finished her story, tears still streaming down her pale face, I took a deep breath and said, "Your story doesn't make sense, but honestly, it doesn't matter at this point, because I'm done." The moment those words left my mouth, she collapsed again, crying relentlessly. The sound of her sobs, choked and desperate, rang in my ears. I just sat there, staring into space, no longer having the strength to feel anything. The pain had become so intense that I couldn't take in any more apologies or explanations. I looked directly into her eyes and spoke clearly. "I'm going through with the divorce, but for the next month, we won't contact each other. I need time, and so do you. We're going to live apart, and there are a few conditions. We both need to remain faithful during this time, and we both need to get full STD testing." I paused, waiting for her reaction, but Kate just sat there, gasping between sobs. "Also," I continued, "you need to tell our mutual friends and family the truth. They deserve to know what happened. If you follow these conditions, then after a month, I'll be open to meeting again to see if there's any other option besides divorce." She looked up at me, eyes filled with pain and regret, and quickly agreed. "I'll do everything you ask. I promise I'll tell everyone. Just don't leave me, please." However, what she said next really shocked me. "But you know, I don't expect you to stay faithful to me. If you want to be with someone else, I understand." I felt the desperation in her voice, but it only pushed me further away. I didn't answer immediately, just looked at her, feeling like a stranger to the wife I had loved. "That's not the point," I replied, devoid of emotion. "These conditions aren't for you or anyone else. They're because I need to be sure. I know divorce might be the right path, but I need to be 100% certain before I make that decision. I'm still 99% sure, but I need time to process everything that happened." Kate didn't say anything more, just continued to cry. I stood up, signaling that the conversation was over, and she stood up, reluctantly leaving. As the door closed behind her, I let out a sigh of relief, as if a part of the weight had been lifted. But I knew this was just the first step on a long and difficult road ahead. Over the past week, a few things have happened. I thought I'd update if anyone cared. First, I've escaped the robot mode I've been in. After the conversation with Kate, the real emotions started to surface. I've had intense emotional outbursts, ranging from anger to unbearable feelings of betrayal. It feels like there's a storm inside me, and it's not easy to calm down. However, I'm still trying to keep myself busy with work, exercise, and doing everything I can to keep from falling apart completely. My friends, since finding out about everything, have been amazing. They've dragged me out of the house, taken me out, talked to me, and helped me escape the negative thoughts. Those moments with my friends have helped me keep my spirits up, even when all I wanted to do was wallow in my loneliness. But no matter what, I'm still in the process of facing the truth. And the truth is, I can't ignore this pain. Part of me knows divorce is the right path, but I need time to be absolutely sure. Only then can I move on completely, without being haunted by what happened. Finally, after much hesitation, I decided to read Kate's email. Part of me hoped something would be different, that reading it would give me more understanding, or at least soothe some of the unanswered questions. But as I opened the email, and each line appeared before my eyes, I wished I had never opened it. The story in the email was almost identical to what she told me when we met, but one detail was conspicuously absent. She didn't mention going into Max's apartment to order an Uber in the email. She simply said they went up to his apartment, without explaining the specific reason. This omission hit me hard, making me feel like she was still holding something back, not being completely truthful as she had promised. And then came the more detailed, explicit parts about what happened. Kate described every moment, every action, what they did, for how long, and what absolutely stunned me, they used condoms. The detail was so matter-of-fact, so clear, that it made me want to throw my phone down and never look back. I couldn't erase that image from my mind. What she described was now deeply ingrained in my thoughts, like a wound that wouldn't heal. The fact that they had been careful enough to use protection, made me realize that this wasn't just a mistake in the moment. They knew exactly what they were doing, and that's what made this betrayal so unforgivable. I'll never be able to forget those descriptions, those images she painted in my mind. Each word, each detail felt like it was etching deeper into my pain, making it permanent. When I finished reading the email, the feeling of numbness returned, this time not from shock, but because I had run out of energy to feel any more pain. I folded the phone and sat silently for a long time, my heart empty, with nothing more to say or think. I wish I had never read it. After Kate's parents found out, they contacted me. Although I was trying to keep my distance from everyone involved with her, I agreed to talk to them because before everything happened, we had a great relationship. Their voices were low and mournful, unable to hide their embarrassment at their daughter's actions. They apologized on Kate's behalf and pleaded with me to reconsider, try to find a way to work things out. But they didn't pressure me. They said they understood if I decided to divorce, and they wouldn't blame me if that happened. I could feel their sincerity, but it didn't ease the pain. I listened, but I didn't make any promises or commitments. "We're so sorry. If there's any chance of salvaging it, please don't give up too soon," her mother said, her voice trembling. "Thank you for calling. But I can't give you any answers right now. I need time," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm, but my heart felt heavy. Soon after, another one of Kate's friends who had been there that night also contacted me. She said she wanted to tell the story from her perspective, maybe to shed some light on things. Her story was pretty much the same as what I'd heard from Kate and her friend: the bar, the food, and then Max driving everyone home. But one detail caught my attention. She said Kate could have stayed at her place for the night, but Kate refused, saying she'd go home early the next morning. That confused me. It seemed like Max insisted on taking Kate home. There was no reason for her not to take the safer option. She also said that, according to her version, there was no attempt to call an Uber as Kate had mentioned. Instead, she said that Max invited Kate to his apartment, and Kate agreed without any hesitation. Each version of the story added a new layer of doubt, inconsistencies between what I was being told and the truth I was trying to find. I asked her a simple but weighty question: "Did you ever suspect anything between Max and Kate before?" The friend paused for a moment, then answered slowly, "About a year ago, I went to meet Kate for coffee, but when I arrived, I saw Max sitting with her. They weren't saying anything strange, but Kate definitely seemed guilty. When I asked, she said they just bumped into each other. I didn't think much of it then, but now, I don't know what to think." This answer felt like pouring gasoline on a fire. It turned out this wasn't the first time they'd met privately. Even if Kate explained it as a coincidence, I couldn't help but be suspicious. Did it all start earlier, a long time ago, and was that night just the culmination of something that had been simmering for a long time? Each new detail that was revealed seemed to push me further away from the possibility of salvaging this marriage. The truth I was seeking wasn't as straightforward as I'd imagined. Each story, each person had a different version, and between the lines and words was the gap of truth never fully told. I thought I could handle everything rationally, but now, I wasn't sure anymore. The pieces of the story were coming together, but the complete picture only made me more heartbroken and disillusioned with what was once our love. When the truth started to unravel, and I realized Kate had withheld a key detail, I felt like the world was crumbling beneath me. The story she told, leaving out the part about going to Max's apartment, was now too obvious. She wasn't being honest, even in that most decisive moment. Every word she said, every tear she shed, became meaningless when the truth was twisted. My mind was blank, numb. I felt like I was sinking, unable to escape the quagmire of this betrayal. That night I couldn't sleep. My eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, my thoughts spinning, images replaying in my mind. I wondered how many other things was she still hiding from me. How many times had the truth been bent to cover up mistakes I never knew about? I wasn't even sure what was true and what was a lie anymore. All night I just lay there, feeling trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from, until the first light of dawn began to creep through the curtains. The next morning, Sarah, Max's sister, also contacted me. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear any more stories, but I agreed to talk to her. She seemed angry, not just with Kate but also with her own brother. Her voice was full of outrage as she recounted, "I can't believe Max was stupid enough to do this. He knew Kate was married. He knew this was wrong. My whole family is furious with Max, and I haven't spoken to Kate since I found out." Sarah told me a story almost identical to what I had heard from Kate and her friend: the bar, the food, and finally Max insisting on taking Kate home. But hearing it from Sarah's tone, it was clear she was completely on my side. She couldn't hide her outrage at Max and Kate's actions. "I warned Max back in high school, told him to stay away from Kate. I knew he liked her. But I didn't think he would act like this. It's not just stupid, it hurts so many people. I apologize on behalf of my idiot brother, and I truly hope he takes responsibility for what he did," Sarah said, her voice trembling with anger. "Do you think there was anything else going on between them before that night?" I asked, feeling an uneasy knot in my stomach. Sarah paused for a moment, then sighed. "Honestly, I don't think anything else was going on. I've warned Max many times, and I don't think Kate is the kind of person to do this repeatedly. But once is bad enough. He made a big mistake." While Sarah's intention was good and her feeling of guilt for Max's actions was understandable, it didn't soothe the pain in my heart. Every person I spoke to, from Kate to her friends to even Sarah, painted a clearer picture of that night. But all the stories led to an unavoidable conclusion. Kate had betrayed me, and Max had taken advantage of the opportunity to do the worst thing possible. After the conversation ended, I sat there feeling myself sinking deeper into disappointment and heartbreak. Knowing that Sarah's entire family was also angry with Max only made me realize that this betrayal wasn't just a temporary lapse. It was the result of emotions that had simmered for a long time. Ever since Max was a teenager with a crush on my wife, it all built up, and now everything had exploded. I haven't contacted Kate since our last meeting. However, through a few friends and scattered information, I heard that she had moved to an Airbnb apartment near our house. Apparently, she wasn't adjusting well to the new life, which didn't surprise me. She's called in sick to work several times over the past few weeks. From what I know, she has the support of a friend she's currently living with, but I still worry about her condition. Even though we're not in touch, I still want to make sure she's not completely alone in this situation. So, I asked Kate's parents to keep an eye on her. They agreed and went to visit her last weekend. I don't know the specifics of the visit, but they told me she was very down. It made me feel a pang of guilt, but there was nothing more I could do. As for myself, I've been trying not to let myself drown in the pain, although it's not easy. Last weekend, I went out with some friends. I told myself that going out would help me escape the negative thoughts, but it ended up with me getting drunk at a bar. I couldn't stop myself from thinking about everything when the alcohol started to take hold. At that bar, I talked to a girl. We had a comfortable conversation, and for a moment, I might have gone home with her. But then, right as I was about to make the decision, I stopped. I knew I didn't want to do anything that would make me lose my self-respect afterwards. That wasn't me, and even though everything that happened with Kate made me angry and hurt, I wanted to stick to my principles. After reading the email from Kate and knowing what happened between her and Max, my hope of repairing things completely vanished. The descriptions in the email made it impossible for me to escape the image of that night, and when I discovered that Kate hadn't been entirely honest with me about other things, I lost all faith in any possibility of saving this marriage. If she had hidden important things, who knows what else she hasn't told me? The decision now seemed clearer than ever. I would go through with the divorce, and in fact I had started preparing for it. I might not wait the extra month to tell Kate that this was my final decision. The waiting seemed pointless when everything was broken beyond repair. Last week, Kate sent me an email asking to pick up some essential items for her work. My lawyer said that, legally, I couldn't stop her from entering the house or taking her belongings, so I reluctantly agreed that she could come by on Thursday night while I was at the gym. I wanted to avoid facing her, so I asked her to leave before 7:30, but when I got home at 8, Kate was still there. As I walked in, I saw some of her work-related stuff by the stairs. But what surprised me even more was seeing her standing in the kitchen, chopping vegetables to prepare dinner. She looked amazing. Her hair was done. Her makeup was flawless, and she was wearing one of the dresses I used to love. Not only that, but the whole house was spotless, everything sparkling, as if trying to recreate the image of a perfect family life. I tried to stay calm and asked her to leave immediately. Kate stopped, looked at me, then silently walked toward the door. But when she got there, she turned back and asked, "Can we talk for a bit?" I should have refused. I should have told her to get out of the house, but in the end I agreed. We sat down and talked for about an hour, jumping from topic to topic. Just like last time, I told her I was going to record the conversation, and she agreed. I started by being direct, asking, "Did you follow through with what we agreed on last time we talked?" Kate responded sincerely, "Yes, I got the S-day testing done, and everything was negative. Pregnancy tests were also negative too, fortunately. My test results came back negative as well," she continued. "I haven't dated or slept with anyone else since we last talked, and I've also told a few friends and family what happened. Many of them are angry and don't want to talk to me anymore." Then I started asking all the questions that had been swirling in my mind for weeks, the things I needed to clarify, no matter how painful they were. She admitted that the story about going into Max's apartment to order an Uber was completely fabricated. "He invited me in for some water," Kate said, "and I knew, on some level, that something would happen. I can't explain why I did it, other than being selfish and wanting attention." I felt my chest tighten as I listened to this, but I pressed on. She also admitted that she had texted Max a few times over the years. He would often send her compliments, and it made her feel good. He was always the one initiating the text, she explained, and I tried to be careful not to lead him on. I never sent him any explicit messages or pictures. Kate also admitted that before we started dating, she and Max had a casual relationship that lasted about 6 months, but they never had sex. "I was always a little curious," she said. Then she recounted that when she was caught at the coffee shop a year ago, it was because Max had texted her asking what she was doing, and she told him where she was. He showed up afterwards, and that's how her friend found out. Kate swore that this was the first time she and Max had done anything since we had been together. "There was nothing missing in our relationship," she said, her voice filled with regret. "I hate myself for ruining our perfect marriage and causing you so much pain." I couldn't help but sigh, then spoke directly to her, I still don't believe your story. And honestly, I don't think there's any reason for us to continue this conversation." She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears, but calmly asked, "What do I have to do to fix this? I can give you my phone, share my location, not go out without you. Anything. I've researched it." Her response only made everything seem more pointless to me. "I'm not planning to be your prison guard," I said, my voice firm but weary, "especially when I know I can never get over this betrayal." Things were tense. But then the situation took a sudden turn that I didn't see coming. Kate suddenly asked me to turn off the recording because she wanted to talk about something private, something she didn't want anyone else to know. I refused, holding my ground that everything needed to be recorded. Kate seemed uncomfortable, but she reluctantly continued. She asked me, "Have you had sex with anyone else since everything happened then?" Unexpectedly, she made it clear that she was okay with it if it had happened. I calmly answered that I hadn't, but that response surprised her. "I guess you must be going crazy," she said, reminding me that we had almost daily sex life. Then she started to talk dirty, zeroing in on things I had wanted to try in the past, kinks I had mentioned or only tried a few times. "I can do anything you want. I know you've always wanted to try these things, and I'm willing to fulfill your needs, even if we don't get back together." I listened in silence, not believing what I was hearing. Then she continued, pushing the story further. "We can have threesomes as many times as you want, or just be open on your side. I'll even find partners for us, or for you if you want." She tried hard to excite me, hoping for something that could keep me from leaving. She continued to ask me, "Who would you want to have a threesome with? I can arrange it?" For some unclear reason, in that moment of fatigue and hurt, I blurted out a name I never thought I'd say: Kate's colleague, who was 5 years younger than her and absolutely amazing. The name surprised Kate, but instead of stopping, she continued, "I don't think you like her, so what do you want to do with her?" I couldn't help myself and detailed a bizarre, complicated scenario just to see Kate's reaction. Surprisingly, she continued to encourage me, even egging me on as I described the details. But when I said that Kate would just sit and watch, her eyes widened in confusion. However, it wasn't enough to stop her. Then I realized that everything I was saying, every word, was just a petty attempt to hurt Kate, to get revenge for what she had done. But instead of bringing satisfaction, it only made me feel worse about myself. By now, she thought her plan was working. Kate pulled her dress up, laid down on the couch in a position I always loved, and begged me to have sex with her. I have to admit, for a few fleeting seconds my body reacted to the temptation, even though my mind was completely blank. But then, everything suddenly became clear, and the words from her email flooded back into my head like a sharp blow. I couldn't explain why, but I started to laugh. Not a chuckle, but a full-bodied, uncontrollable burst of laughter. Kate looked at me, confused and seemingly deeply hurt. She moved away, the pain evident on her face, and then started crying. The whole scene became so ridiculously funny and painful that there was only emptiness left. "It's time for you to go," I said, my voice calm but firm. She didn't argue, just quickly left, probably too embarrassed. As she left, I looked after her and added one final thing: "You need to find a lawyer soon. We're getting a divorce, and I'm not waiting any longer." After Kate left, I sat there for a while, feeling lighter than I had in a long time. A strange sense of clarity washed over me, and I realized that I had dodged a bullet. It was more than clear that this marriage couldn't be salvaged, and what Kate had done to try to hold on to me only made things more ridiculous and painful. This weekend, I have a meeting with my lawyer, and I want to file for divorce as soon as possible. I need this to be done so I can move on, stop holding on to anything. Very quickly, I went to see my lawyer to begin the divorce proceedings. His office was in an old building, with a quiet space, a stark contrast to the turmoil in my heart. As I walked into the room, I felt heavy, not because of the decision to divorce, but because of the fact that this would be the official end of everything Kate and I had ever had. My lawyer, Mr. Grant, a calm and experienced man, invited me to sit down and started going over the paperwork he had prepared from our previous discussions. "I know this isn't an easy process," he began, "but what we do today will ensure that you can move on decisively and fairly. It's time to settle everything clearly, so there are no disputes afterwards." I nodded, listening, but my mind was actually drifting, still reeling from recent events. When he asked about joint assets, bank accounts, and details of asset division, I answered mechanically. All I wanted was for it to end as soon as possible, to avoid the uncertainty and hurt. "How do you think Kate will react when she receives the official divorce notice?" I asked, trying to anticipate the next step. Grant paused, thought for a moment before responding. "Based on the current situation, she'll probably cooperate, but we need to be prepared for any possibility. If she objects or demands unreasonable benefits, we'll handle it. But let's try to keep things on a conciliatory note, avoiding unnecessary escalation of conflict." I remembered Kate's words from our last meeting. She seemed desperate to save it, even offering unacceptable things. The frustration of thinking about her possibly messing everything up only made me more determined. Grant continued to explain the next steps. We'll send her the official divorce notice, along with the asset division terms we discussed. You want to keep the house, right? Then we'll negotiate a reasonable compensation if she agrees to relinquish ownership. As for other joint assets, we'll divide them equally, unless she wants to agree on something different. I nodded, feeling things starting to move in the way I wanted. We continued talking about finances, debts, and even small items. Each detail felt like the final pieces of our marriage being disassembled. There was no anger in me, just a cold determination to clean up this mess once and for all. Then he asked a question that I had been thinking about but didn't want to face. What about the issue of sentimental assets? Memories, objects that hold sentimental value, things that have emotional value. How do you want to handle those? I fell silent for a moment, not knowing how to answer. Of all the things I thought about when getting a divorce, facing those objects full of memories seemed like the hardest part. From wedding photos to the gifts we had given each other, those things were still somewhere in the house, like ghosts of a beautiful past that had now turned to ashes. I'll handle them later. I can't think about them right now, I replied, my voice softening. I knew I would have to deal with them, but not today. I understand, Grant said, folding the documents in front of him. We'll move forward quickly. You'll receive notifications soon about the first hearing date, and we'll do everything we can to protect your rights. The meeting ended, and as I stepped out of the office, I felt a little lighter. Even though there were still many things left to do, I knew I had taken another step toward closing this sad chapter. Each step took me further away from the marriage with Kate, but it also brought me closer to the peace I was seeking. Outside, the sky was overcast, and a gentle breeze blew, reminding me that life went on, no matter how many storms we faced. I got back into the car, drove away silently, knowing that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least I was in control of my own future. The past few months have been incredibly difficult. Since deciding to divorce, I've tried to keep my distance from Kate. We've only met in person a few times to settle legal issues or exchange necessary things. No more long conversations, no more arguments or tears, just tense silence between two people who were once so close. After a few weeks of no contact, I started to question whether complete isolation was the best way to handle everything. I wasn't thinking about getting back together, but I felt the need for a calmer conversation when both of us had weathered the initial storm of emotions. So, I decided to suggest a meeting with Kate, thinking we could discuss everything with clearer heads. We chose a quiet afternoon to meet at a restaurant we both used to love. Sitting across from each other, the atmosphere between us was lighter than before. No more tension, anger, or blame. It was a calm and respectful conversation. Kate opened up about the pain she had caused and affirmed that she would do anything to make things right. I'll do anything, she said, her voice firm and sincere, and although I believed her, I didn't commit to anything. I still had too many wounds that hadn't healed, too many unanswered questions. After that lunch, Kate made a surprising suggestion. Would you be willing to go with me to my therapy session? My therapist has experience working with married couples. Maybe you'll find some clarity there. I didn't know what to say at that moment. The idea of going to therapy with Kate, after everything that happened, seemed like a strange move, but I didn't dismiss it right away. I thought about the proposal for a few days, trying to weigh whether this could help me release some of the tangled emotions inside. Finally, I decided to agree. After all, this could be an opportunity to resolve everything definitively, with the help of a mediator. The first therapy session was a very difficult experience. We both sat there, neither of us knowing where to start. Everything felt tense. Then, as Kate started to open up, tears began to flow. She talked about her regret, about the pain of seeing me hurt, but I still didn't get a direct answer to the question that had been haunting me for a long time. Why did she decide to deceive me? When I asked again, she said something I had heard before. I don't know. I was selfish and wanted attention. I can't forgive myself for that. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't the answer I was looking for, and even though the therapy session lasted for hours, I left the room feeling like I was still lost amidst the wreckage of our marriage. The therapist was surprisingly impartial. She didn't judge, didn't favor either of us. Instead, she tried to help us understand the nature of our relationship, why it failed, and whether it could be salvaged. However, the therapy ended with the same conclusion I had reached before entering. The betrayal had destroyed the foundation of this relationship. Kate tried to offer solutions for reconciliation, even saying she was willing to change herself, take responsibility for all her mistakes, but I no longer felt those efforts could fix anything. Finally, when the therapist asked us what we wanted from here, I answered frankly, I think the best thing is for us to continue with the divorce proceedings. Kate looked at me, her eyes teary, but she didn't argue. She just nodded, understanding that things had crossed the line where we could go back. Maybe she had understood this for a long time, but it was only hearing me say it that made her accept the truth. Leaving the therapy room, I felt a part of me had been lifted. I knew I had made the right decision. Despite the immense pain, sadness, and regret for what was lost, I felt this was the necessary step for both of us to find our own lives again. Last week, I drove to Kate's parents' house to return some tools I had borrowed from her father. We had arranged for Kate to be there, and her parents went out for a few hours to give us a chance to talk privately, to settle everything one last time. Seeing them again, I couldn't help but feel heavy. Kate's parents looked tired and heartbroken, which only made it harder for me. Nevertheless, they were very supportive of my decision. They didn't blame me, didn't try to change my mind. They just wanted the best for their daughter and for me too, even if it meant we would walk on separate paths. The conversation with Kate took place in a quiet atmosphere, but without the tension of before. I had thought a lot about how to tell her that I wanted to proceed with the divorce, but when the moment came, it happened more naturally than I expected. "I've thought a lot about it, and I want us to proceed with the divorce," I said, my voice calm. "I don't think we can go back to how we were. The betrayal, it's something I can't get over. Even if we tried to rebuild trust, I feel like it would take years, maybe even decades, and that's too big a risk for me to take." Kate sat silently for a moment, her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't argue. Perhaps she had known for a long time that this was inevitable. Finally, she nodded, her voice trembling, but accepting. "I understand, and I respect your decision. I just want you to know that I'm really sorry. But if divorce is what you need to move on, I won't stand in your way anymore." We had a calm discussion, no more outbursts of blame or pain. Kate and I started making plans to divide our assets, talking about selling the house. We also emailed our lawyers right there during the meeting, ensuring that everything would proceed according to schedule. Even though the marriage ended in pain, we parted ways on good terms, as people who understood that our paths no longer intersected. The divorce proceedings are expected to be completed by the end of the year, and the house we once shared will soon be up for sale. It's a strange feeling, knowing that what was once a symbol of love and happiness is now just an asset to be divided. In the meantime, Kate and I have agreed to avoid contact and not start dating anyone until everything is finalized. Even so, single life has started to creep into my existence. I've had a few casual encounters, and it feels strange returning to single life after all these years of being together. But strangely, I don't feel afraid or lost. Instead, there's a bit of relief in this new freedom. An opportunity to start over, but this time for myself. I've started going back to the gym regularly, taking care of my mental and physical health. I'm spending more time with friends, family, people who have always been there for me throughout this difficult time. I've also returned to hobbies that I had neglected: reading, hiking, and spending time in nature. With each passing day, I feel myself getting closer to finding myself again, the person I lost in this turbulent marriage. And even though the future holds many unknowns, I believe I will be okay. This divorce isn't just the end of a chapter in my life, but the beginning of a new one, a chapter where I can live authentically, learn from my mistakes, and walk forward stronger.